Hi, it's Michael here from Australia. Myself and Ken, we're taking over SMB Nation. Today, it's ours. We're going to tell you some stuff from, the coalface, the stuff that we experience. So first of all, Michael Jenkins here from Australia, and Ken.
I'm Ken Dwight, the virus doctor in Houston, Texas.
So between the two of us, we kind of cover this thing called a globe, and we have experiences from all over this, and obviously talking to other partners and things like that. And interestingly enough, our experiences always differ because, hey, I'm in a little island floating somewhere else, and we have different legal systems, we have different politics, and everything else is different. So we have different experiences. So today we're hoping to bring to you some information about what we're experiencing that might help you or make you aware, or at least make you think about what other people are dealing with. In today's topic, we're going to talk about cyber insurance, or as some people have other names for it, but generally, it's insurance to protect you against what may happen should someone hack you or encrypt you or do something nasty to your IT equipment. Not your microwave oven, not your toasters, but your IT servers and equipment. So who's got it? I have it. Who's noticed the premiums? Well, here in Australia have kind of quadrupled in the last 12 months, and it's getting more and more expensive. I think the underwriters are starting to experience some pain, because some of these things are getting paid for, like ransoms and things, are getting really, really, really expensive. And of course, they're writing their contracts in such ways, or at least here in Australia, where they've got little clauses, little things you don't notice. And of course, then if you go to make a claim, it's not that easy to claim. So the perspective from Australia through to Houston, what exactly is going on? I might pass to Ken to just give us some idea of what goes on over there.
Well, one of the things that may be different, and I don't know exactly the regulatory differences between Australia and the U.S. in this respect, but in the U.S., you have to be licensed to sell insurance products. And so the average ISP or MSP or break-fix shop or consultant can't really sell cyber insurance. But there are some ways that that's being addressed to do it through a third party that in turn the reseller can make the introduction, get the commissions, that sort of thing. But one of the things that I'm sure is very similar between, well, all over the globe is the fact that, of course, there are more and more ransomware attacks and more people are filing their claims. And in the early days, when a claim was filed, the insurance provider would say, well, okay, you paid for the premium, so we're going to cover it. And they weren't that diligent about seeing how responsible the policyholder had been. So now they're much more restrictive in terms of what it takes to get the coverage. As you mentioned, the premiums have gone way up as a result, mainly of the payouts. But the other thing that's happening is that, once again, as you alluded to, they're becoming more and more clever about keeping from having to pay a claim in the first place with their various exclusions, riders, qualifications, requirements, that sort of thing, to the point now that when you buy a cyber insurance, cyber liability, whatever it is, so there are different names for it, you're required to fill out a form that says, do you do this? Do you do this? Have you done this? Do you regularly do this? And so it's not rocket science to figure out how the insurance company wants to see those questions answered. And so anybody could answer them the right way to get the coverage. But if they have a claim and turns out they've put something on there that was not truthful or that wasn't completely truthful, then that claim is likely to be denied. So that's kind of the back and forth of the two sides of the picture. And of course, it's changing so much and so quickly that it'll be very different a year from now.
Yeah, I think the guys here in Australia have been talking to your guys over there because it's the same thing here. As IT guys, we can't kind of recommend a product. We can introduce a broker, but then leave the room. We can't give any kind of advice. It's the same as legal advice. We can't give legal advice. We can introduce people, but we can't recommend a product. With that, though, there's different types of cyber security insurance. Previously, it was you're covered. Now it's you're covered for one incident, or you're covered for up to $25,000, or you're covered up to $50,000. And there's all sorts of limits and things like that. One of the things that we discovered with a particular claim is that there is an excess per incident. Now, I'm going to explain this incident to you because it became extremely cost prohibitive to claim on the insurance. We had a client where we were able to prove somebody gained access to their network on a particular day. We could then prove on another day, they actually placed some files on there. And on a third day, they actually ran the ransomware. And on the fourth day, it popped up with the message. That was 5 incidences. I don't know how they calculate it, but it was 5 copies of the excess that they had to pay. So you can imagine that getting access to a system from the same hacker, to me, sounds like the one actual incident, and that they're just perpetrating it over many days. But the way they interpreted it is each time they did something was an incident, and each time was about $1,000 excess. So suddenly it got to the point where we caught them before they'd ransomwared anything. It did cause some business disruption, and they went to claim on it, and then they said, it cost us about $8,000. The excess is going to cost us about $10,000. We're not going to claim. So then you look at the statistics of who's been hacked and who's been paid out, and you start to wonder how good they are, because people do look at what they can afford to pay and then, of course, back off on excesses and things like that. But the thing is it's the terms and conditions, how it's written, how it's defined. And then, of course, you talk to your broker to find out, is that definition how you understand it? Because my idea of paying an excess against an incident is not the same as their idea. But they need to make their money. They need to somehow pay out everybody else's claims. And so that's one of the ways they've done it. Another interesting thing I found, at least here in Australia, is that if you do make a claim, let's say that somebody is holding your server to ransom, the contents are in a backup sitting up on the dark web, and they're threatening you with releasing it to the world, and it's going to be a privacy breach and things like that. As soon as it becomes a privacy breach, some cyber insurance policies don't cover it, because they're covering the hack. They're not covering the fact that you're now liable for that private data that's going to be available on the dark web and possibly sold. Again, you got to read those terms and conditions. Now, let's say this leads to a fairly expensive payout from the insurance company. They don't want to pay it. So they've got some other MSPs or companies who've been through forensics training at an expensive amount of dollars, and they on-sell that service to actually come out and push their way onto your network to find out if you, as the current incumbent IT person, are somehow liable. And we've seen situations where companies have actually said $3,000 for a firewall to protect 100 people. I'm not going to pay that. I'm going to use this $50 one that I picked up down at the corner store. And they even sign that off on quotes that, no, my IT company's giving me bad advice because they want me to buy an expensive firewall. Then they get hacked. Along come the forensics people, and the first thing they say, this firewall, it's got old firmware. You can't update the firmware. It's got known problems in it. Therefore, your IT guy is actually the person that needs to be sued here for the value of what the insurance company would normally pay out. And that makes us IT guys a bit scared, because we're actually signing off with our customers that we've given you good antivirus, we've given you good advice, we've told you what to do and what not to do, we've given you a design for your network, we've designed it with firewalls, designed it with security, and you've decided at this point in time you don't want to take that. Who's liable? You've done your job as an IT person, but this forensics company who are paid by the insurance companies, it's their job to make sure the insurance company doesn't have to pay out. So they're going to go around this network. They're going to open up the drawers and say, hey, look, somebody here in their chest of drawers has got an extra modem you don't know about, or an extra router. Or over here, someone's using a password on a sticky note stuck to their screen. Or somebody wanted remote desktop allowed in so that the manager can get in after hours and it's not secured. They're going to look at all of that. And as soon as they find the smallest little hole in the security, of course, they turn around and say, well, your IT company needs to be talked to, and potentially you lose a customer, and potentially you get put through court. So you've got to be very, very careful. Now, here in South Australia or in Australia, now that I've had a few of these things happen, I am very, very, very clear with my customers. I make sure they absolutely know what they're signing for. And luckily, most of them have brought to me their cyber policies for me to review. And I've told them up front, you're going to fail here, you're going to fail there. You don't have a firewall that protects you. You're not following the antivirus advice, because I'm signing off on it. However, I'm only signing off on between myself and the customer. I cannot sign their policy. That is up to them to sign it. So I'm going to tell them, you fail here, here, and here, and this is why, and this is the quote to fix that, and this is my recommendation, but I cannot sign this document. And you'll be surprised how many customers do give me their document to sign. I'm not going to sign it. But that's been my experience of late here. We've probably had around about 9 to maybe 15 insurance payouts. It's mostly been through to someone doing something silly. We've had mostly internal, a person who decides to start up their own business in competition with their old boss, has plugged in a USB drive and copied off the contents of the server, that kind of thing. And we've caught them. But we have been through and seen a lot of these claims. And unfortunately, the process of proving what happened can be more expensive with the excess as well than the money you're ever going to get back. And so I would say probably 30% of what goes on in Australia is never reported to the officials because it's just not cost sensitive. It's cost sensitive. It's not something they can afford to do. But I don't know how you're going over there, Ken, and how the rest of the world. So what is your experience there?
Well, the stories I hear are that it's a much higher non-reporting percentage here. Now, there are two different aspects. One is the reporting the breach in terms of the disclosure to the regulatory agencies or that sort of thing, but a different issue with filing a claim with the insurance company. And most of in fact, the general advice that I give to the MSPs that take my training is if you're dealing with a ransomware issue, the first thing you need to do before you touch anything is find out if they have cyber insurance. If they do, then don't touch anything. The insurance company has their own forensic team and legal team and PR team and everything else. And so on that basis, I have not gotten involved in any clients that got hit by ransomware who had cyber insurance. So I don't know what the percentage of the ones that, as you talk about, that decide that it would cost them more to file the claim than it would pay to have it done. But other than that, there are two other factors that come into play here. One is that recently some government agency has declared that if you pay ransom to a government basically that is on our do not do business with list, then you're liable for possibly even criminal prosecution. So that still is, it's an early enough in the game to not know how that's really going to play out. But the other thing that's been a big change from what it was in the early days is that generally, at least again, based on the stories I hear, the insurance company is more likely to pay the ransom than refuse to negotiate because they've discovered, which you and I could have told them, that it's typically much more expensive to try rebuilding or recreating the lost data than the ransom. And in fact, the figure I've heard is that the ransom is typically about 1/40th the cost of what it would cost to rebuild it. So from a dollar and cent standpoint, the insurance company has a strong incentive to say, well, we'll just pay the ransom or limit the coverage. And as you touched on a few minutes ago, with any type of insurance, there's some variables that the user or the customer can choose in terms of their limit, their deductible, the exclusions, and things like the additional, what you refer to there is the secondary or tertiary infections or separate, what you and I would consider to be part of the same attack. So I think that the critical lesson to be learned here is any large organization would be well advised to have cyber insurance. And if they've made the decision they need it, be sure they get competent, unbiased advice on what coverage they need, what carrier, what kind of premiums to pay, the claims paying experience of that particular carrier, and that sort of thing. But again, you and I are not qualified to give them that advice other than say, you need to find this out.
Yeah, I think as any kind of IT provider, you need to be doing the basics. Does the customer have a good backup? Is that backup protected? Have you given them a security plan? Have you reviewed the security plan? Because things change. Have they signed off that they're going to do these things and abide by them? So have you made sure that you've really covered yourself? Because this customer might be just going off doing their own thing. And once you've got all that under control, I would recommend a cyber plan, yes. I'm not going to recommend a particular one, but I'm going to tell them, go to your broker, whoever it is you trust, get good advice, listen to them. If you have to, bring in a lawyer, whatever you need to do, because that is all they can do. That's their protection, is a backup, security plan, and insurance. There's nothing else you can do. And if they get hacked, the horse is bolted. You don't get a chance to go back in and clean up any mistakes you've made. So practice good security yourself. Always think security first. with this customer. Is there a problem? Is there something I'm kind of pushing to one side I don't want to address just yet? Don't think that way. Security first, because if it happens, the gauntlet comes down, bang, you've lost access to that network. The forensic investigators are in. If they find a problem, they'll point it at you. It's too late to be thinking about it tomorrow. So get them insured, recommend they get insured, make sure they've got good backups. If all else fails, recover off good backups, get them back up and running. It's really hard to deal with these ransomware people anyway. Not that they're ever honest, not that they're actually going to probably give you back your data. It's just not worth entertaining that idea. Just let the insurance company do whatever their process is and make sure you've done the right thing by your customer, which will do the right thing by your business. So that's my experience, and that's what I recommend to my customers. Obviously, I recommend things like changing passwords, putting in decent antivirus, web filtering to make sure they're not doing anything silly. I do phishing testing against my customers, make sure they're not going to fall for anything. I do all those sort of basic security things. And then when it comes to these forms, I can truthfully fill them out. But some of these forms, you really got to be careful. I had one form that said, please list all of the private IPs. So we're talking about the IP addresses of computers on your network on this form. I can't figure out to this day why they needed to know that, but they do ask some strange technical questions. Customers do look at these forms and think, my IT guy's got to do this, but you just got to remember that you are putting down on this piece of paper the truth, nothing but the truth, and they have to sign it. So really, that's the experience I've got. That's the recommendations I've got. Would you like to close, Ken? Anything you've got to say?
Well, as usual, we've covered a lot of ground, and there's still a lot more that we didn't cover, and it's something that either of us could talk about for an extended period of time. But I think the main point is to be aware that it makes, in most cases, good business sense to carry cyber insurance, just like automobile insurance or errors and omissions or medical or anything else, in the hope that you won't need it. But if you want to be prepared for what happens if you do need it, be sure that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed.
Absolutely. They need it. And of course, you need to make sure you're doing the right thing as well. So in the end of the day, you've all got to do the right thing for this to go forward and for you to be safe from these sorts of things or get reimbursed. Well, look, that's all I've got today to say from Australia.